All right, what is going on, Ravens flock? And we are obviously here with two very familiar faces in the Ravens Twitter world. Joining me today is Boss. We will be starting up a new podcast called The Ravens Way. And Boss, what is our goal here to educate the people with?
Yeah, just want to welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of the Ravens Way podcast. I think both Marshall and I are aiming to provide an unbiased look, analysis, assessment of the Ravens franchise. There seems to be two sides to the debate and not a lot of middle ground to be found, and I hope we can find some middle ground. And we also want to maybe make some suggestions on how the Ravens can stop their decade-long regression now, where they haven't made a conference championship game in 10 years, and get back up into truly contending every season. 20th most playoff wins over the last 10 years out of 32 teams is not a strategy that is now should be put on a pedestal above reproach. I think there are some things that the Ravens front office and brass can reconsider, and the offseason is the perfect time to discuss that.
I agree, definitely. It's feels like the Ravens have lost a little bit of their touch, a little bit of the mentality, and I feel like there's some pretty clear paths to kind of getting back to maybe being contenders every year, but at least them making a conference championship once in 10 years, twice, three times. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to it. And Boss, without further ado, you want to get us into our first thing?
Yeah, so we'd like to give a quick rundown of the Ravens offseason so far at the beginning of the new year league year, the moves that they've made, and how we see that impacting the team going forward. I think the biggest move so far has to be the big change at offensive coordinator, going from Greg Roman, who was spearheading the offense for 4 years, 4.5 maybe, to Todd Monken, a coach that has experience calling plays in the NFL and at the collegiate level from Georgia. I think there are definitely some benefits, some adjustments that I'd like to see, but let's grab your take first, Marshall.
So initially, I wasn't thrilled with it. I mean, of course, I really didn't know a lot about it, but the first thing that came to mind to me was like, okay, this is like a 60-year-old guy. I'm sure he's some hardball, former hardball water boy or something that got a job. But then, you started looking into it and seeing he was at some offenses that had some high volume passing, like Tampa with Jameis Winston. And he even mentioned that in the press conference. Of course, he threw in the joke about he liked throwing the other team a lot. So he showed a little bit of personality. And then, of course, the Cleveland offense with Odell and Jarvis, and he had those guys pretty amped up. So initially, like I said, it didn't really satisfy me, so to say. But as time went on, as I started gaining more information, and then one of the biggest things that I've been honing in is high passing volume offense. I believe that that is one of the ways the Ravens can make a conference championship again. So as time went on, I really like the hire. I like the energy that the guy has. I mean, he's infectious. You could see the press conference. He doesn't seem like a Harbaugh guy to me. I never knew Harbaugh would allow a coordinator to swear at press conferences, but I'm in. How about you?
Yeah, I really like his personality. I think he fits the culture, at least the culture that I like. Maybe the Ravens Way 2.0 culture or 1.0 under Billick. He definitely has a lot of personality. What the most exciting thing about his resume to me was his time spent with Mike Gundy at Okie State, with some of the concepts of that air raid system that they've been using in the Big 12 for all these years. A few things that I'm hoping to see from Monken. Everyone talks about marrying the run with the pass, and that's certainly true. Play sequencing, I think, is really what separates some of a good offensive coordinator from a great offensive coordinator, where they set the defense up with a certain play, and then the next play right after or a few plays later, just the sequence of how they call their plays. But the two main areas that the Ravens need to improve their offense from last season is explosive plays, where they were among the league's worst in chunk plays, 20-yard plays, 40-yard plays, just those big explosive plays that tilt the scoreboard in your favor immediately. You need those, and yards after the catch. The Ravens really struggled last year for yards after the catch, particularly after Rashad Bateman suffered his injury. I think some of that is because it's just the nature of having a tight end-centric offense. Tight ends don't have as much speed and don't break as many tackles necessarily as wide receivers. I also want to see just spreading the field out more, both certainly vertically, but also horizontally. Too many tight sets with Greg Roman, just allowing the defense to play in the phone booth, so to speak, which really impacted, I think, their explosive play percentage, and just threatening every blade of grass. It seemed that particularly in 22, the Ravens were just willing to concede the boundaries outside the hashes along the sidelines and just not even really threaten those areas, allowing the safeties to come into the box, which had a detrimental effect on the tight ends and the running backs. But Monken, of course, is handcuffed in a way by Harbaugh's identity, what kind of team he wants to have, as well as the personnel the Ravens have at their disposal. You can want to do a certain thing, but if you don't have the players to do it, you can't. So that's where I am with it. I hope that the Ravens do give him the freedom to call more volume passing, because efficiency is great, but volume of passing also is very important. The last, I believe, 8 Super Bowl teams were all in the top 16 in passing volume, pure volume. So you need both efficiency and volume. And the last 3 years, the Ravens have been in the 20s or even 30s in passing volume. And I think that ends up costing you in the playoffs when you are forced to chase points against a consecutive series of some of the very best teams in the league.
Yeah, 1,000%. I agree with everything you said there. And we'll see. We'll see if they decide to give him some ammunition, or maybe they're like, make these tight ends work. Hopefully not. That would be a step back in the wrong direction again. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I think that he of all the things that we've talked about, I think he has like the it factor to me for a coordinator. Just seems like he has the it factor that I was looking for. So to go into our next topic, the Lamar non-exclusive tag, boss. Personally, I like it. I thought it was a pretty bold move to kind of put the onus a little bit on Lamar, and if a fully guaranteed contract is something that he thinks he's worth, I respect it. But if another team isn't going to offer, why for the Ravens? So I thought that was one of the best moves that DeCosta's made so far, and it's a bold move, and we'll see how it plays out. But I liked it.
I agree. Just to put a button on the coaching changes, I think pretty much, considering the Ravens' position, about the best they could do as far as getting Monken. He wasn't the shiniest object in the toy chest, but they don't have a quarterback signed right now. Harbaugh may not be the best head coach to work with, etc. And I think the assistant hires were also high quality. So really, I think now you can't develop a player above their maximum potential. So you can't take a 7th round pick and say, I have a new cornerback coach, and now I'm going to develop into a starter. But anyway, pretty good. So Lamar, I thought the NEFT, non-exclusive franchise tag, was the best move. We kicked it around for months, it seemed, and probably the day of or the night before, I kind of landed on. I thought that was the best strategy, and as we've seen it play out, I think it was a tool to get Lamar to the table, essentially. So he's not budging. The Ravens aren't budging. Unfortunately, they're fighting this proxy war between the NFLPA and the owners as far as fully guaranteed contracts, and it's just a wrong place, wrong time situation for both the Ravens and Lamar. Neither of them is out of line. Neither of them is doing anything malicious, but again, they're pawns in this proxy war. So the NEFT was beneficial. It allowed Lamar to maybe get some more opinions and really find out what his true market value is. It also allowed the Ravens to save, what was it, about $13 million in cap space versus the exclusive tag. So it seemed like a good move at the time. The best option between multiple bad outcomes potentially. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of traction. It doesn't seem that another team has stepped up to the plate and said, Lamar, we are willing to meet your demands, or we're not willing to meet your demands. And now you can go back to the Ravens knowing with the knowledge that your demands are not going to be met by anybody. We haven't quite got to that point yet. I think we have a few more weeks of this saga continuing to play out. Hopefully only a few more weeks. We'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah, I think, and unfortunately, I think this is going to probably play out all the way till the deadline of this. I think it's July 17th, if I'm not mistaken, the deadline of the tag being placed and when a player can sign it. So, yeah, I don't see an end to this anytime soon. I think our best chance is probably immediately post draft. Team doesn't get a quarterback, and of course they don't have a first round pick this year. Maybe someone comes out of the woodwork and tosses an offer out there just to see if it'll stick. And yeah, I mean it's pretty exhausting. I feel like we've been talking about this, non-exclusive and this whole Lamar contract situation for so long, and there's just no outcome, no resolution, in the fog, so to say.
Yeah, it's I definitely have Lamar contract fatigue at this point, which is, I don't know many people that enjoy the business side of sports more than I do. So if I have it, I'm sure pretty much everybody does. Question: do you think the Ravens are better off? Let's say that they're at an impasse and he's not going to return on a long-term deal. Are the Ravens better off having him play out the season on the NEFT, to me, if a team swoops in post-draft and takes and gets the offer sheet signed at that point, that's tough for the Ravens, because then you're basically forced to rebuild in 2023, even though you've already made stopgap acquisitions. So you're kind of the worst of both worlds. What do you think would be a better outcome for the team? Because that's the way I look at it at this point. I'm tired of debating the semantics of the contract language. Let's look at it from the team's perspective.
The better outcome of what?
Playing out the NEFT, and then potentially having this saga continue into next off season, or if he gets scooped up post draft.
I would go with the first one. I would say that the best outcome of that would be him play another season. Just because if he gets scooped up post draft, like you said, you just put all these investments into stopgaps at wide receiver, and I'm sure the next quarterback, whoever will draft a wide receiver, the next quarterback will use him. But yeah, I couldn't see a world where, well, I can see a world, and it's probably the world we live in, where Lamar gets scooped up post draft and the Ravens are always left holding the bag, so to say. But I just want to shout out real quick, Engraven in the chat. Yeah, what's going on, Engraven? Love you.
What's up, buddy? Good to see you. And Terry as well has a comment. Terry, We're going to circle back to the off-season plan at a later segment. But thank you, Terry, also for joining us. But
yeah, I rather Lamar play on the NEFT, and then say he has a good season and we're at an impasse. You can hopefully move off of next season, maybe get a little more value than you think you're getting now. What about you guys?
I mean, I just hate being in no man's land. I think that's the reason why the Ravens have regressed, is they're trying to win now and contend every season at the same time. And maybe that was more feasible in the 2010s, before we were in the win now era, where all these teams were just loading up Just it's an arms race, and the Ravens are kind of halfway in, halfway out all the time, and never really all the way there. We see how it plays out. I mean, I'd certainly like to have Lamar as the franchise cornerstone quarterback long term. But if it's not going to happen, I really don't want to see a stopgap quarterback that gets you to 7 wins and, you can't carry over, 10, $20 million of cap space. You can't roll it over. And you're just treading water. I mean, they've just been treading water and all that. The only benefit of that, I guess, besides maybe slightly better attendance at the bank in December, the only result of having that stopgap is essentially a worse draft pick. You're not going to win the Super Bowl. You're probably not going to win a playoff game. So really, what's the point of winning 7 games or 8 games versus 5 or 6 games? How does that? I don't think that's beneficial long term.
Yeah, and I mean, are you even going to, make a wild card round with the stopgap quarterback? Because I mean, I know we have it later, but I'm looking out for the Browns next year. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm just saying, like, you got to stopgap quarterback, and now we got all these AFC North teams that are just kind of on the uptrend, and we're kind of going the other way. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the whole contend every season versus go all in. Yeah, if you can contend every season, by all means, go for it. But going into the playoffs with the 10th best roster year after year after year, or even the 8th best roster, or maybe once in a while you have, a top 5 roster. Maybe in 2019 they did, but you go 10 years and you only have a top 5 roster a couple years, maybe 1 or 2 years. You can't just expect it. You're going to get hot, especially when your team isn't built with that passing offense variability that these teams that do get hot in the playoffs they have. So anyway, let's we'll dive into a lot of tentacles, a lot of these debates, and obviously the Lamar situation has a massive ripple effects throughout every facet of the organization. But at this point, we're just wait and see. We did have a key player, maybe the best defensive player on the team last year. He was released, Calais Campbell, potential future Hall of Famer, on the cusp of 100 sacks. For my money, the best run defender on the team last season, and a very effective pass rusher, complementary pass rusher, I should say, as far as setting up his teammates on some twists and stunts, those sort of things, just being that coach on the field. I think it's a massive, massive loss. And some of the more optimistic Ravens fans are saying, well, maybe the offense won't get that much better than it was last year, but at least you have that really good defense to fall back on. I'm not quite so sure this defense is anything special on paper right now, considering the players that are poised to depart. Calais certainly seems to be one of them. He's visited a few different teams already, and it doesn't seem like he's coming back.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was almost a necessary evil. Maybe more of like an eye opener for the team. Like if your run defense, I think we saw in that Steelers game, if your run defense is so predicated on a 37, 38-year-old 6'7" mountain being in the game, you got some problems. You got some schematic problems. You got some personnel problems, and I mean, we had to make cap space. So I feel like that. Like I said, necessary evil. He'll probably go back to Jacksonville and probably retire and finish out. And why not go play for a contender who he'll definitely at least see something in the divisional round, past the divisional round next year. So
yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that Jacksonville and Baltimore have the same exact Super Bowl odds at this point. So resting on the laurels that the Ravens are always contenders, I'm not quite so sure Calais sees it that way.
Right. So, like I said, necessary evil, but now we need. I mean, it's probably gonna be another year of young guys trying to step up in that spot and try to fill that void. Because I mean, I kind of feel like we do. I kind of feel like it. We need some guys to step up, and also I think those guys probably deserve an opportunity, like Broderick Washington and Travis Jones and Matty Buquet. Now, of course, they're not Calais Campbell, but yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I still think they have 5 quality defensive linemen returning, including Brent Urban, who was re-upped as well. A couple young, or 3 young guys really, and then Michael Pierce his contract was restructured. You had to save somewhere. I'm okay with a subtraction on the D line if that results in a upgrade somewhere else where you need an upgrade. If you're just subtracting from the D line and saying these young guys are going to develop and become, and we're not going to put that money towards anything of substance or consequence, then you're going backwards. Let's be real here. We'll get to the improvement index, but when you lose players and you don't add players and the other teams are adding players, you're going backwards.
Right. It would have been nice to see that that money we saved to go into a Rocky Sin. I think that would have been the right pull and give. You know what I mean? So,
would you have? And I don't know the math exactly on this, but it's pretty damn close. I believe you could have kept Calais if you released Pierce and Gus and Rijkaard, roughly. Now you'd have to replace 2 of those contracts with a vetman guy, and it's not exactly the same, but roughly exactly the same. Would you have made that trade? Because in my mind, 1 difference maker is worth more than 3 complementary.
I don't think so. I don't think I would.
Okay.
I believe it was more. It wasn't the player itself, but the issue of the run defense being awful without him. I feel like that the Ravens need to see that if a 38-year-old is out for a game and your run defense is porous, maybe you should pivot elsewhere. So I mean. It's just he's 38. He's still playing at a high level, but for the $9.5 million price tag, I think it was the right move.
Fair enough. So Eric DaCosta was able to restructure Michael Pierce's contract as well as Gus Edwards' contract, keep them with the Ravens. He added some void years to both of these, as well as extension for Kevin Zeitler. New way for the Ravens to do business. I think it's fair to wonder why they only take that step when absolutely boxed into a corner and forced to. Void years and those sort of backloaded mortgaging the future can be detrimental to your team. But if the other teams are doing it too, then you're not necessarily falling behind them. I think just a real quick aside, larger point. The Ravens need to be compared to the competition. They can't just be compared to themselves or what they used to do or anything like that. That's how you analyze something fairly.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. But I thought hopefully it's a come to Jesus moment for ADC, using the void years and realizing you can save a little bit of cap on that year. So I hope in the future they keep using it, just because I feel like if the Ravens want to see themselves past the divisional round, they're going to need to stack the roster a little bit deeper with talent than they have been. And I feel like void years is a pretty easy way to do it. Of course, in future seasons, it's going to hurt your cap. But I'm pretty sure if you extend someone while there's a void year, the void year kind of gets eaten up. I don't know how that works, but Dan probably.
I think it just hits the cap immediately. But we'll save the intricacies of that for the guys that really specialize in that. So. Another notable move was the trade of Chuck Clark, defensive signal caller for 3 years now.
Yep.
Not an impact elite ball hawk playmaking guy, but certainly beneficial to communication on the field as being the player with the headset to relay the play call. Also was pretty good, I thought, as a matchup in man on tight ends. Solid run defender, really filled the gap, short tackler. And I think maybe his biggest value was made a good bit of plays as a overload blitzer, whether that was tipping a ball in the air that someone else could intercept or forcing a fumble or pressuring the quarterback into an incompletion. So while I do believe that Kyle Hamilton will be a better strong safety now that he gets to move to his natural position, you're still losing. You're still downgrading because now you don't have a guy that played slot cornerback either. And I was hoping for a better trade return than a conditional future 7th-round pick. A little bit of a cautionary tale as far as what positions to invest in, because some positions have more trade value than others.
Right. I thought I don't necessarily dislike Chuck Clark the player. I think Chuck Clark, the idea of like being content with a mid to solid rotational player at the position for so long and giving him a $5 million a year contract when he can't even fetch like a 4th-round pick on the market. I felt like that was more of like him going was more of like a John Harbaugh kind of like sayonara, and I feel like that's what he represented to me. Like he represented a lot of Harbaugh's like ideals, like locker room player and all that stuff. So, of course we have to fill the void somehow, and I'm sure. I mean, they love devalued positions, so they'll fill. I mean, they had Adrian Amos in the other day, so clearly, it's pretty important.
Yeah, they love their safeties, and I don't blame them. So we talked about some of the departures. Let's talk about some of the retentions and a few additions as well. Special teams re-signings: Delshon Phillips and Nick Moore, the long snapper. You need a long snapper. You can't cross train an offensive lineman to be a long snapper. It's just too specialized. Phillips is a special teamer. I don't agree with devoting a whole lot of roster space or cap space to a special teams only contributor. But for that value, I think it's fine. 2 re-signings that I thought were beneficial for the team: Justice Hill, the running back 3, special teams ace. I think he provides a good change of pace on offense. And when he gets an opportunity, he produces. The other guy is Geno Stone, a safety that was also re-signed. Again, I'm a big fan of dime defense. I think he gives you flexibility to move Hamilton down as a dime backer or even the slot corner, and put Stone on the back end with Williams. That gives you a lot of range. I really like both those re-signings with the big caveat now: do not draft the running back in the 2023 draft. You don't need it. You got 3 guys that are all good running backs. You might need a running back in 2024. Guess what? Get that running back in 2024. There's always going to be a running back every single year. Well, I don't know, because teams don't like investing in running backs, and then they fall to you. You don't need to plan ahead at devalued positions. No matter how much you like a running back, if he's going to sit on the bench for a full year, 25% of his rookie contract, it's not good value. So I like both those re-signings, as long as they now apply the needs and adjust their needs in the draft because of them.
Yeah, I personally I would have preferred the draft this year instead of Justice Hill. I just felt like what I think he's making $2.5 a year, right?
No, it's just barely more than the vet min. I mean, it's basically inconsequential.
I would have preferred. I think we need a pass blocking back pretty badly. And I know we're not talking draft this time, but Roschon Johnson, who I think will definitely be there in the 4th round, he was someone that kind of fit the bill for what I was looking for. Really good pass blocker, and I like Justice Hill. I like what he brings is, like you said, change of pace back. But I'm not spending a dime on a running back. I wouldn't even though I know it's Vetman inconsequential, Rule 51, but I would have just liked them to go to the running back in the draft this year.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that argument too. I do. Again, so I like Hill if that changes the dynamic of Vetman or close to Vetman versus a mid-round pick. I think it's pretty similar value there. If you can keep Hill and Stone kind of like the new Anthony Levines, with a cheap contract that can be long-term Ravens that are ace special teamers that also have a defined role to contribute on offense or defense. I think that's a good use of cap. Two acquisitions that have flown under the radar that I do not believe have been getting enough attention since the end of the season are both former Clemson players. John Simpson, the guard who was drafted by the Raiders in, I believe, the 5th round a few years back. Big, wide body guy. He's a mauler and not the most agile, but a guy that can probably do pretty well as a fill-in between, hypothetically, Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum, two above-average players at their position. Another one really intriguing to me, Trayvon Mullen, a former Clemson corner, a 2nd-round pick from South Florida. 2nd-round cornerback has a lot of natural talent. I always support taking flyers on those kind of guys. He had a pretty good year also for the Raiders 2 seasons ago, where they were on the cusp of considering a long-term deal with him, where he was kind of one of those young up-and-coming corners that was going to be, not a tier 1 guy, but a tier 2 or tier 3 kind of cornerstone player. And I think it's a worthwhile reclamation project, especially considering the lack of talent on the current cornerback depth chart.
Yeah, no, I like that move a lot. And like you said, I mean, he was playing pretty well. I want to say it was in 2019. He was playing pretty well. So I'm all for it. And the same thing with John Simpson. As I guess the Ravens are looking through the Raiders' trash, so to say. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Simpson was in the 2020 draft in the 4th round or 5th round. It was one of the two. But I remember actually watching him coming out of the draft too, and he seemed like a one of those like late round guards that might hit. But
I had him in the same range. I had him in the same tier as Ben Cleveland. So, that's at least that's the caliber I think he is.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. So nothing wrong with getting a little bit of depth for the guard. I think it's important to have some competition there, and hopefully whoever the best rises, and hopefully the Ravens do not spend an early pick on left guard.
So a few departures. Ben Powers, starting left guard from last year, signed a lucrative contract that should net the Ravens probably a pretty good 4th-round comp pick. Also lost, not likely, Josh Oliver, the hybrid tight end, probably an overpay. I really think that was one of the bigger overpays, but good for the Ravens. And then another player who apparently some are more fond than I was expecting, Tristan Colon Castillo, the backup interior offensive lineman, also departed. I still don't really consider offensive guard to be a high priority this offseason, but we can come back to that. Let's break down the big addition, the put you over the top piece, the signing of the legend, Nelson Aguilar.
Yesterday, the Ravens wide receiver core was ranked 32nd, and today it's ranked 31st. That's kind of what I think of the move. I don't think it really moves the needle at all. I mean, I like the skill set though. I like the burner skill set. I think that's something that maybe can give us a little more space in the offense, and maybe Todd Monken has got the hands of God to lay on him and can maybe make his hands a little more sturdy. But it's just like oh, okay, it's not. I mean, there were other moves that I would preferred, like a Mecole, like a Paris Campbell, even Chark, who got signed yesterday. But I guess the extra $2 million in cap space that they're saving is important. So it's just like so whatever move. I'm not really upset about it. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah, I'm mostly indifferent. I preach about draft pedigree being an indicator of talent, and Aguilar has draft pedigree. So I think that indicates that he does have some talent. He does have some speed. He's probably pretty damn similar to Demarcus Robinson, really. We're talking about a wide receiver 4 caliber player here. Certainly fair to question utilizing about 30% of their cap space on depending on how it's structured. Yes, I'll put that caveat in there. But on a wide receiver 4, when you don't have a wide receiver 2 or a cornerback 2, why are you spending 30% of your available cap space on a wide receiver 4? I think that's fair. And if you want to model after the Chiefs and what they did last year, and we've spoken about this, and some of the Ravens fans like to compare the Ravens wide receiver core to the Chiefs, and it's disingenuous because the Chiefs had 4 players all picked in the top 2 rounds, plus a veteran making $10 million a year, but no wide receiver 1s, just really a crew of wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3s. I think that can work for the Ravens. I don't think the Ravens need a bona fide big name marquee wide receiver 1. That would be the one place where I think they can downgrade because they are a run first team. I think you can maybe get away with a lesser wide receiver 1 as long as you have a strong wide receiver 2, a strong wide receiver 3, a strong wide receiver 4, and 5. If those are all above average, you can go below average at the other because you're run first. That's the only discount I'm allowing at that point. That being said, right now, basically the Ravens have 3 with Bateman, Duvernay, both coming off significant injuries. Don't forget Aguilar. You still need 2 more. If you want to go the Chiefs route and say we're not going to have a wide out 1, but we're going to be deep and talented, you still need more.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if Demarcus Robinson is out and Aguilar's in, I'm cool with it. I'm not really a fan of Demarcus Robinson. I know a lot of Ravens fans are, but he's just not for me. He's not my cup of tea. But I agree. I think the Ravens need 2 more, and hopefully someone gets released here soon. Maybe the Jets want to release Corey Davis. I would welcome that addition. And then tossing 2 rookies to that. I feel like the Ravens can cook, and I feel like if Todd Monken is true about using every blade of grass, then having someone like Aguilar to be a flanker and a Z and kind of just stretch the field just a little bit more than Devin Duvernay can, I'm cool with it. So, but I agree overall though. The Ravens definitely need 2 more, whether that comes in the draft or maybe even post draft. There's someone out there that they can pounce on a little bit, like the James Bradbury of wide receivers.
Yeah, that'd be the hope. I just we've seen that show play before. We don't have to go too far back to last offseason when Eric DeCosta traded away Hollywood Brown on the first night of the draft, and a lot of Ravens fans were thinking, you finally have 2 good receivers and a tight end for the first time in forever. Why are you trading one away? What the hell are we doing here? And everyone said, well, you still have day 2. You still have, 9 picks, and you have post-draft cuts, and you have training camp cuts, and you have the third wave of free agency, and you have the trade deadline. But at the end of the day, if the Ravens don't value the receiver position as much as the other 31 teams, they're not going to have a good wide receiver room. There's just the supply and demand dynamics prevent that from happening. So let's dive in now to the needs, because I think we covered most of the news unless I missed anything. From my perspective, post Aguilar signing, you still need a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3, a cornerback 2, a cornerback 3, and an outside and a situational edge rusher. Those are the 5 needs. I don't think there's other needs for 2024, 2025, but those are the 5 immediate needs in my view. Unless you fill those 5 positions with legitimate players, this is not a legitimate Super Bowl team. Period. We saw a ranking yesterday put out by Clay, who's a unbiased source, and the Ravens roster's in the 10 to 15 range right now. So you gotta, not only do you have to add pieces, you have to add more than the teams that are already ahead of you to close the gap.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd probably forego cornerback 3 off that list. I think a good solid cornerback 2, unless you're considering Marcus Peters a cornerback 3 at this point, then I would. It depends on how you view him, because I would take him back pretty easily and draft someone early. But I think I agree with most of them. I think we need a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 3. I think we need a situational edge rusher. Justin Houston or even someone like Melvin Ingram. If Houston wants to go somewhere else, Melvin Ingram's a pretty good situational edge rusher. But yeah, I agree with all of them. I just think the only one that I could forego is if they got a strong cornerback too. Whether that's in the draft or a first round pick basically, or a $7 million plus APY type corner. I think cornerback 3 you can be okay with hopefully one of these. I know you don't always want young guys stepping up at those kind of positions, but eventually you got to save some money somewhere, and I'm okay if they want to save a little bit of investment at cornerback 3 because they already have Stevens and Armand Davis and Pepe, and yeah.
I mean, I could see that. I personally would put cornerback 2 as the number 1 need right now, and more than wide receiver, straight up, because offense can dictate the terms to the defense, and they can dictate the personnel. The defense can't dictate. So if you're playing Cincy and they go to 10 personnel, 4 wide, you got to have 4 corners on the field. There's no other way to do it. You can't get away with it. I've seen too many very good Ravens defenses just fail at the wrong time because they had one weak link in the secondary. And Roquan Smith can, take away every tight end, and Marcus Williams can patrol, the deep. But if there's a hot route and your slot corner can't cover their receiver, you're done. They're just going to pick you apart and march right down the field. We've seen it too many times. Not to mention, I do not want to repeat the same mistake they did with Rashad Bateman last year, thinking, okay, we have one really good, one guy at the top of the depth chart, a pretty good number 2, and that's good. Yeah, okay, well, what if then Bateman got hurt and he didn't have anybody behind him? If Humphrey gets hurt, as we saw last year, even when he just missed a snap here or there, and that was when they still had Peters, the pass defense crumbled. I don't think it's a good strategy to chase a championship relying that much on your cover man, not with the caliber of quarterbacks in the AFC currently.
Right. I think that's why I could see them shifting. I think if they wanted to maybe take advantage of not putting so much investment into the cornerback group, if they signed a Rock Ya-Sin and shifted to a man coverage type of unit, I feel like Stevenson and Marlon can all trail pretty well in man, and I feel like that's where we can forego having that super solid cornerback 2 and have 3 really, really good man coverage corners. I think that's my strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you got to pick and choose somewhere. I would have picked and choose to not pay linebackers, but that cat's already out of the bag. Terry here, we'll transition to some of these comments because they are on this topic. Restructures and trades are going to happen. I firmly agree with that. I think Marlon Humphrey is the perfect player to restructure right now at this point. There's no downside to it unless you think that he's not going to play out the second to last year on his contract, really. Now's the time. If hypothetically they didn't use that cap space, just roll it over next year. There's no problem with that. If you can do that, and maybe Ronnie Stanley as well, then you can bring back Marcus Peters and Justin Houston, and then you check those 2 boxes off, and I would love to bring both those players back. I think they're great in the locker room. I think they're great for Ravens culture. Then I think you can, with those restructures of Humphrey and potentially Stanley, you can bring back Peters and Houston, and then you go into the draft in a much better position. As far as trading Queen, if you can get a pick back for him, yeah, by all means, stick Josh Ralston there. And, we've seen how many undrafted inside linebackers the Ravens have developed into really good players over the year. That'd be a great place to save some cap.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to happen pretty soon. I would say within the next week and a half at most. Definitely, I agree with Marlon. I think Marlon's the first guy up, and maybe you feel a little more riskier with restructuring Stanley just because of the injury. Even though he came back this year and played well, he still didn't of all the games he could have played and all the practices he could have shown up at, he didn't. So I understand playing a little more cautionary with that one. But if you can get, I think if you can get a third or a fourth and like a sixth for Queen, I would take it. I just feel like you need to start taking some assets from the middle linebacker spot and putting it somewhere else. Because I just feel like a lot of the spots were going to be weak, and I feel like you can, of course, the fourth round pick at corner or wide receiver is not going to maybe be as impactful as Queen, but you are at least going to fill the void at those spots.
I think they are. I think a good corner is more impactful than a great linebacker, so to speak, just because of the nature of the positions, and linebackers are a dependent position. Bottom line, if you're going to pay Roquan $20 million a year, you gotta that needs to allow you to save somewhere else. Now, are the Ravens saying that they're going to just roll with the 5 defensive linemen and not bring back Calais? Is that the savings? It's either going to have to be the defensive line or the linebackers, or potentially safeties. But the Ravens are already really stocked at all those spots. I don't think any inside linebacker, whether it's Fred Warner or anybody, that still doesn't allow you to get away to go cheap at cornerback. They're just they don't. The range doesn't overlap. So, I hated the Queen pick at the moment when they made it, and that has continued for all these years now. Let's go position by position. The ones we ID'd, and just who would you target? Let's take it from. Actually, let's start at corner, because let's go with corner. Who are you targeting between now and the draft?
Rock Ya-Sin, Bradley Roby. I think Bradley Roby's still out there. I think it's between those two guys. I'm not super familiar with how deep the corner free agency market still is. Just because a few have been taken off that I like Greedy Williams and Jameel Dean. But I think those two, and of course bringing back Marcus Peters, that's another corner I would target. I think between those three, you can pick one and be okay.
I love to bring back Peters. He's probably, out of any free agent currently available, the number one guy I would target. I think he still has, a lot left in the tank. He just turned 30. I mean, he's not 35 years old, and his skill set should age well. And let's give him the benefit of the doubt for a bounce back season coming off the ACL. Corner's a little thin, Ya-Sin, if they can get him for a good price, but I would prefer Peters if those are the two choices for equal money. I think you already touched on some of the outside backers. Houston would also be my top choice there. Just a couple other guys that are out there. Jadeveon Clowney, who some people think would be a good match. Leonard Floyd and Jason Pierre-Paul. If Ojabo takes that, comes in as that situational pass rusher, and OA does take that next step, which I do believe he will, based off of his play, his rookie season, and his play down the stretch last year. I think he just got burned out by that stupid roster construction where he was playing, 80% of the snaps for the first 6 weeks of the season, because for some reason the Ravens wanted to carry 3 special teams only inside linebackers and only 3 total outside linebackers. Different story for a different day. If that's the case, then what you really need probably is a guy that's more of an edge setter, and that is JPP. That was really his best role last year.
I agree. That's been one of the needs I've been looking for, and I know we're not talking about draft in this video or this stream, but I've been really looking for a strong side run defender that can kind of set the edge and get up into someone's grill. That's why I kind of liked Jermaine Johnson a lot last year. He was someone that could set the edge. Someone that could play the Hutchinson role. I think that's oh my God. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a strong side defensive end. I need someone that can someone's like 6'5", 270, and can lay into somebody and don't let anyone get outside.
Did Jihad Ward latch on with anybody yet?
He went back to the Giants.
Did he? Okay. So there are some options here as far as for some reason that market hasn't really heated up quite the way it has in years past. If you don't adjust that with a veteran, then I think there are going to be some good options in the draft. Where you want that bigger body who can set the edge with an odd man front and then kick inside pass rushing situations. And those guys, they call them tweeners, in betweeners. Those guys you can usually get a decent one on day 2, especially if you have more day 2 picks, which is another question here from NFL Mock Draft Nut. Is your preference to trade down from 22 and recoup some picks? At this point, yes, it is, unless a really special talent is there. There's too many holes right now and just because of the way they box themselves into the salary cap and people leaving. Unless you do a purely need draft, you don't have enough picks to build a viable, fleshed out depth chart, really, unless you move back. And if you can move, usually the difference between the caliber of prospect at say 40 versus 22, they're pretty damn similar. So if you can get 2 guys in that day 2 range out of that 1 pick, I do it. Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would trade back. I just don't. Unless it's Deontay Banks or Quentin Johnson at 22, just go ahead and move back because I feel like you said, we got a lot of depth needs at corner and wide receiver, and I feel like even though, and like I said, unless it's the 1 pick that's someone that can take you over the top, JSN, Quentin Johnson, Deontay Banks, or if somehow Witherspoon or Gonzalez are there, it's just you rather move back and try and build up the competition, so to say, with as many rookies you can fit in there.
Let's say they stick and pick at 22. Let's say they stick and pick a corner, whether that's Banks or probably Banks. And then day 2 begins and one of their top few wide receivers, let's say Jalen Hyatt, is available at 40. You trade next year's first for this year's second, and to really make sure you actually have a chance to win in the playoffs in 2023?
Oh, next year's first. I mean, that's at that point, why not just trade next year's first for like an actual proven wide receiver? You know what I mean? I trade next year's first for Judy if we're going to go that route.
Well, the thing is, you got that guy Judy for 2 years, and then you have to pay him or somebody else. So it's kind of like you're using 2 chips for 1. But yeah, let's get into the wide receivers now, and then we'll touch on any other additional needs, or are they more future needs? Wide receiver market. Odell Beckham is still available. To me, he was maybe the only wide receiver 2 actually an unrestricted free agent this offseason. I don't consider Jacoby Myers to be a wide receiver 2 caliber talent, regardless of his grading. So that's the needle mover. To me, he's the needle mover, and he has experience with Monken. The question is, will the Ravens come up and meet his price? And after they spent 3.5 plus incentives on Aguilar, it makes it less likely.
Yeah, I felt like the Aguilar signing was kind of like we were going to give this to Odell, but he doesn't want to sign it, so we're just going to give it to someone else. So that's what the Aguilar signing kind of felt like to me. I love Odell. He allows you to maybe not be so focused on getting wide receiver in the first round, or even trading back getting wide receiver. You can kind of like take BPA, which is always the best route, BPA to position of need. But of course, we're kind of putting ourselves in a hole. So we take $6 million and toss it at a wide receiver 4, and now I just feel like the wide receiver market's kind of dried out unless you want to go Jarvis Landry post draft.
I do not want to go Jarvis Landry. I don't think a possession receiver does really anything for this offense at this point, a possession slot. And that applies to draft prospects as well. You have all these tight ends. You need perimeter. I mean, you have specific needs. It's not just get whatever wide receiver you can find. It's get the piece that's going to complement what you already have. Corey Davis is an interesting name who I believe could be released, could be part of the Rodgers trade package, could be held on to. We don't know. Other than that, you're looking at probably big-name guys. You're looking at Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Mike Evans potentially, or DeAndre Hopkins. And making that splash is not the Ravens' MO. and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would trade. I mean, Judy is like the perfect Ravens move in terms of. I mean, of course, not trading a first for him, but someone that's good for the short term and the long term and wide receiver, and is a pretty good fix to what we have. I would do Sutton too. You can trade for Sutton and restructure the contract and still not have to worry about teams matching Lamar. I think Hopkins is kind of out of the question with the contract he has. I don't think the Ravens want to fit it in. They can, but I don't think they want to. So, yeah, I would take any of those guys, but knowing the Ravens, we aren't making a move at that position until April 29th. Sorry.
That's a good distinction that they can fit people under the cap. They don't want to. That's been something that the general fan base at large has finally caught on to the last couple of years. They can do a lot of different things. They don't want to do them. So I think the better conversation to have is what we think they should do versus what they've done in the past or what people would say if they did X, Y, and Z. It's just kind of pointless. So, John Harbaugh promised a remade wide receiver room in the end of season press conference. Eric DeCosta promised, and everyone was really excited that they were finally going to prioritize the wide receiver room after I thought it's been their biggest need since the 2019 playoff loss to the Titans. Some people disagree. Maybe a little Stockholm syndrome there. Regardless, will they have sufficiently? What do they need to do between now and week 1 to sufficiently deliver on that promise of a remade, playoff caliber wide receiver room?
Regardless of name or pick, I think they need to sign one free agent and they need to draft 2 players. I think that'll suffice for me. That's 4 new. They said it'll be a whole room of new guys. So 4 new guys, Aguilar, another free agent, and 2 draft picks. That makes 4. I think that Now, of course, you'd like it to not be like a 4th and 6th round pick at the wide receiver, not like that, but let's say 2nd and 4th, 2nd and 5th, plus insert free agent wide receiver. I think that between now and week 1, that'll do for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's more quality over quantity. I don't want developmental projects that don't really have any developmental upside to begin with, like James Prochet. I think if you're going to take a late round guy, we've talked about this, you want a guy that's done very well in the relative athletic score because those guys their game translate. Tape is one way to identify will guys game translate. Another way is their athletic measurements. Will their athletic skill set translate? I think they need 2 starting caliber receivers between now and then, and I don't think you're going to be able to get a starting caliber receiver unless you draft one in the top 75. So unless you're drafting 2 in the top 75, you need to sign a guy better than Aguilar or trade for a guy better than Aguilar plus pick a rookie in the top 75. And it's a lot to ask for. But let's not forget, the Ravens put themselves in this position by the decisions they have made in the past. So they don't have the right to cry, it's all out of our control. Lamar, even on the non-exclusive franchise tag, he doesn't have the biggest cap hit in the league. Other teams are able to manage their rosters better. That's not it's not Lamar's fault that the Ravens have a bottom 5 wide receiver core. And I don't care how good your defense is and how good your tight ends are and how good your running game is. Unless you have a very good passing offense, you're not winning a Super Bowl in 2023.
I agree. And I don't buy the argument that the Ravens are handcuffed because they went after Darius Slay like it was water and you've been in the desert for 50 years. I mean, they were like, boom. Highest bid. I don't, people want to argue, maybe, he wasn't a free agent. The team basically planned on announcing on releasing him, and the Ravens were on him like that. So the Ravens are handcuffed. The only person that is handcuffed is themselves. They're just doing it themselves, and
they handcuff themselves to the radiator, and then they say they're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't buy that they're handcuffed with this Lamar situation.
I mean,
They
look at
can
what the
make.
other teams are doing. Let's be real here. There was a time when we would say, "Hey," or at least I would, after 2016 is when it's really started. Now is the time to rebuild. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with the 10th best roster. You're just not going to do it. They refuse to do it. But now we've seen other teams. I mean, Philly has made 2 Super Bowls and rebuilt in between. The Rams have made 2 Super Bowls, rebuilt in between. The Saints have been all in for like more than half a decade, and they still have the best Super Bowl, the same Super Bowl odds as the Ravens after all this conservatism. And the Ravens lose just as many homegrown players as all these other teams do. There's got to be a better way to do it. There's got to be a better way than the current Ravens way. So anyway, secondary needs. We have a question here about Osiris Torrance, offensive guard. I personally do not want to spend anything valuable on an offensive guard. Ben Cleveland is good. He can be decent. You pick a guard in the third, you can develop him. It's a lot easier to develop a third-round guard than a sixth-round receiver. If you're willing to do that at receiver, be willing to do it at guard. You also have McCary. You also have Simpson. I want to stay the hell away from any more investment in the interior of the offensive line this offseason. Just don't have enough ammo to do it.
I would say a 5th-round pick. Just toss a 5th-round pick at it. I wouldn't put anything more than that.
But that's for the future pipeline, right? It's not for 2023.
Well, I mean, if you can get a high-level zone guard, I think Antonio Mafi from UCLA. That's the one I've been thinking about. You can get a high-level zone guard and have him and Linderbaum work together and kind of be like this duo. Zone, like, this is gonna sound weird, but like zone can kind of like coexist and almost blend together in a mesh. So like, if you're running zone track to the left, you have Stanley, a zone guard, and Linderbaum. That guy's gonna have a lot easier time than Ben Cleveland being out there trying to run the train track. So I would target a zone guard in the 5th round because I feel like that allows a little bit of a quote unquote higher floor right away in terms of meshing with the people in the line.
Yeah, I can see it. I'm just not sure that they have that luxury of spending picks on long-term needs unless they fill some of these short-term needs before the draft. Again, they box themselves into this situation, and they can't just do what they've always done to get themselves out of it. It's not going to work. They're not going to have enough talent on the field in the right places to go head-to-head with Mahomes and Burrow and Allen and Lawrence and Herbert and all the other studs. Just not enough. Any other secondary needs? For me, defensive line, I'm okay. I don't think you need a guy. If there's a stud penetrator there, I'm always down to take those kind of guys, but I don't think you need a body really anywhere except for cornerback, wide receiver, and pass rusher.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe backup quarterback with the last pick in the draft in case Huntley goes somewhere.
Stetson Bennett, baby. I like Stetson Bennett. Exactly. Why not? That he would be a good backup person. I'm not teasing. I really do think he'd be a good backup. Ready to jump into our AFC North whip around?
Yep. So, what team are we going to start with first here? The Cleveland. I'll start with the Browns.
Let's go with Let's go with the division favorites. No.
The Bengals.
Yeah, man.
All right, go ahead.
Bengals are plus 125 to win the division compared to the Ravens plus 225. So almost twice as good of better odds. Even though they lost both starting safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell, starting corner Eli Apple, starting tight end Hayden Hurst. They haven't done a whole lot besides try to fix their offensive line with maybe one of the best signings of this cycle, former Ravens legacy Orlando Brown Jr. to play a left tackle for a relatively modest deal. They also picked up Cody Ford, a former early round pick who has guard tackle versatility. So basically, on paper today, better offensive line, worse defensive backs. I do think they should be the favorite. They just have more talent and they have better pedigree lately.
Yeah, I think they also lost Jesse Bates as well, which is probably one of the best cover 3 single high safeties in the league. But Who they have behind him, and I was pretty high on him last week. He was my safety one is Daxton Hill, and I think Daxton Hill has the athleticism to translate, and I think he will. I don't say it'll be a seamless transition, but I think Daxton Hill can 80% do what Jesse Bates did for them. That's how I am on him. So they got I think Cam Taylor-Britt as well in the wings, his corner. So they developed him a little bit last year, didn't really play him, and now he'll be able to go out there and take over. So obviously they should be the favorite. I mean, why not? They got the best passing offense in the division. They're gonna be. I wouldn't say they're gonna be better than last year, but they're still gonna be the favorite, I think.
I'd agree. The Ravens have catching up to do. They did beat them once last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Chase missed that game with like a hamstring.
I think it was T. Higgins. T. Higgins missed that game.
Higgins. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, Cincinnati long-term, they're going to have trouble maybe keeping their guys because they're a cheap organization. But right now on paper, they're better than the Ravens. So it's a tough place to be. But 2 years in a row, they won the division. So next up is Cleveland. Go ahead. Give us your Cleveland rundown. You're excited to talk about that.
I am. I'm bullish on Cleveland. Cleveland's my favorite now. Cleveland's my favorite. I don't care about the Bengals. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. I think Cleveland, like, between they finally fixed the run defense problem with Tomlinson. I think he's going to be a huge piece for that team on D-line. Now Myles Garrett's not going to be getting double teamed a lot. Now he's going to get an ISO pass rushing situation. Then you toss in whoever they acquire as the opposite edge rusher to Myles Garrett. And now I just think those guys are,
Okoronkwo. They signed Okoronkwo.
Oh yeah. So and he's pretty good. So I just think that they're, the Cleveland curse is for me it's up. I think the team's ready to go. They finally fixed the glaring needs. Of course, they acquire Elijah Moore, which I think is a pretty low cost, high upside type of move. And I think him and Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz. They just got Marquise Goodwin as well for another burner. Mm-hmm. I think they're amped up, and I think as disgusting as to say, I think Deshaun Watson's going to be he's going to be better. I don't think he'll be back exactly to form, but I mean, he's in a West Coast offense, and those offenses tend to let your quarterback kind of have guys run wide open. So between that and Nick Chubb, they're going to be rolling, and I almost want to say I'm more worried about them taking over the division than I am Cincinnati.
They look good on paper. Cleveland looks really good. They did lose Greedy Williams and Johnson, their safety. They replaced him with former chief safety Juan Thornhill, which is probably an upgrade. Probably going to lose Kareem Punt. I don't think backup running backs move the needle very much at all. When Dearness Johnson can go in there and replicate what he did, like all running backs, pretty much. Elijah Moore is a really big needle mover for Cleveland. I had him stacked really like razor thin to Rashad Bateman in that draft class. Really good player who does have that Z ability. I would have loved the Ravens to make a move for this kind of guy, whether it's an Elijah Moore or, as you mentioned earlier, Mecole Hardman, Paris Campbell, DJ Chark, guys with upside. That's how maybe you can get a little bit go cheap but still get good production versus an Aguilar. You get what you pay for. There's no hidden upside really with a guy like that. But the Ravens, I guess they just don't believe in a high ceiling wide receiver room. Cleveland's plus 400 to win the North. On paper, I think they're better than Baltimore. I would have them ahead if I was make 70 odds right now. And then the team that I probably expect to remain in the cellar is Pittsburgh. They're plus 550. A team, mind you, that did go all in to keep Ben Roethlisberger towards the end of his deal and keep their team together. And they didn't suffer this 3 years of 2 wins that everybody likes to fearmonger. But they lost Cameron Sutton and Devin Bush, their linebacker, who started hot and faded. Sutton's a pretty big loss for them. He's a good corner. He's a guy that I would have liked to see the Ravens take a look at last year. or this year even, as opposed to a Kyle Fuller. But they were able to retain him last year, lost him this year, replaced him with Patrick Peterson, a guy who we were talking about, I remember, about a month ago as potentially a Marcus Peters replacement. They also made a value signing potentially with Isaac Seumalo, the former Eagles guard, and grabbed Herbig, just kind of a depth offensive lineman. Seems like Pitt is kind of swimming in circles, not really a team on the rise or on the fall, just almost in a way like the Ravens, just maybe a win or two behind them per year.
Yeah, I mean, they're not really. They're like I said. I think they're going to stay on the bottom. I'm not really concerned. Unless they go Addison or some receiver at 17, then they really want to put themselves over the top. If they have a corner that falls, or they have a tackle that falls. But I think one of the dumbest moves they made over the past couple of years is trading up. I don't know what they gave up, but they traded all the way up to get Devin Bush. I think that was just.
They gave up a future first.
Yeah, that was bad. It was very bad. So.
Yeah, but then again, they did the same for Fitzpatrick, for Minka, and that worked out for them. So I'm not against trading firsts. But
not for devalue positions, though. Not for devalue positions. If you're trading, I wouldn't trade up for a linebacker. I don't care who it is.
Agreed. I agree with that. It seemed like linebackers were getting overdrafted for a while there. And who knows? Maybe that's coming back in a way. But that's where the Ravens sit. I mean, they've lost more than they've added. And I know some Ravens, the most optimistic Ravens fans that maybe don't follow some of the other teams as closely, think that, the Ravens have a really good championship caliber roster if they can just keep what they had. They're not going to be able to keep what they had, number one. They're already losing their best defensive lineman, potentially their best pass rusher, best ball hawk, best edge setter, and defensive team captain, and one of their best offensive linemen. And this is really the problem with the Ravens' way of trying to contend for the wild card every single year. You basically level out your trajectory. So you never go up and you never go down. You're just always constant, which is great if where you were was championship caliber, but it's not. They actually need to improve. They need to have an offseason where they gain more talent than they lose. They haven't been able to do that for a very long time because of their very flawed, in my view, contend every season philosophy and strategy. There's a metric called the NFL Improvement Index, which attempts to quantify who's losing players, who's gaining players. And people say, well, the Ravens have some players that were hurt last year who are going to return, and they have young players that are going to develop, and they have players who are going to add in the draft. Guess what? All the other teams get to do that too. So if you have the 12th best roster right now, unless you add more than the other teams do, you're going to have the 12th best roster at the beginning of the season. I don't think that's good enough. And I think trying to win in the playoffs without a top 5 roster, with a roster in the 8 to 10 range, is why the franchise has regressed. And by hook or by crook, by rebuild or by all in, one way or another, that has to change. Or this playoff drought, this conference championship drought, unfortunately, in my opinion, will continue.
Yeah, currently the Ravens are bottom 3 in net off-season ads. They're in the bottom 3, so they're the third worst off-season team. I don't think that included Aguilar, but I don't think that really does much. So, yeah, I just feel like the Ravens are. Of course, there's a lot of off-season to go. There's a lot of things that happen. A lot of moves that can be made, can be had, and we could be coming on here in 4 weeks and talking about how the Ravens have just turned the ship around. I don't think that's likely. I think we're gonna find ourselves kind of talking about the same thing that we've been for the past 3 years. But yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got for now, guys.
So yeah, the Ravens currently have the 11th best odds to win the Super Bowl today, as we speak here. It's very hard to win the Super Bowl. Everybody talks about playoff variance and how it's hard to make it through, and unfortunate bounces of the ball and one-off games. And I agree. It's very hard to win in the playoffs, especially when there's 10 other teams with more talent than you have. You got to get your talent ratio up. You got to be walking into playoff games as heavy underdogs with specific on the field mismatches that favor the other team is how you lose playoff games. I do believe the Ravens can reclaim their place as playoff contenders, legitimate Super Bowl contenders, but they got to make changes to do so. And those changes are taking a more short-term outlook, not trading away first-round picks to get cost-controlled rookies that are going to benefit your team 3 and 4 years from now. Keep the players that you need to go win in the playoffs this playoffs. And it needs to be a very targeted plan. EDC needs to count every dollar and put it towards the specific skill sets that they need to build a well-rounded roster. It's been 10 years since they had a well-rounded team in 2012. It's not a coincidence that they won all those playoff games when they had more talent than they have now. So it can be done. They have a long way to go. And really, to me, the key is stop being so stubbornly adhering to this Ravens Way philosophy that hasn't worked in 10 years and expecting to quadruple and quintuple down on it again, and you're not and have different results. It's not going to happen. The NFL landscape is not what it was 10 years ago.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. I mean, that's this is where we're at. We're kind of heading in a circle, and you're kind of hoping for the alcoholic to put down the drink a little bit. Maybe drink a little bit of water here and there. Maybe go to a few rehabs, go to AA meetings. But clearly, alcoholic has gotten worse, and now we're about to be on our last drink here. It seems like.
Just come to the middle. Just moderate your stance a little bit. Come be a Philly or just be a Buffalo. Be a Buffalo that is steady. And then once in a while, the Von Miller becomes available and you make that move for that piece instead of never, ever actually making that final cherry on top piece. They don't want that, but they got to change that. So anyway, that's all I got. I want to thank everybody for joining us for our inaugural episode of the Ravens Way podcast. We're going to be doing this on a weekly basis. We're going to start diving into some draft prospects on our next episode, specifically the wide receiver board. And we appreciate the involvement. And thanks for listening.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Appreciate everyone for joining. This was really fun. I'm looking forward to getting this going, the draft content, and getting a new computer because the background, I'm sure anyone can hear it, sounds like a plane taking off. But
that's Nelson Aguilar's career, shooting up to the sky.
Yeah. He, the Ravens love giving people last opportunity. So that's what he's getting here. It's here into the XFL. I'm sure DeMarcus Robinson won't be employed anywhere next year. I'm going to be honest.
He's going to be back. He's going to be back with Baltimore.
I hope not. I really hope not. But appreciate everyone for joining, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.